Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski. What a time it has been in the past few weeks. I had COVID. I think so. The episode I'm recording this a week in advance, so it's going to go up next weekend. But the episode that I just put up this weekend that I'm recording was the one I filmed right before I got sick, and I was talking all about how I went to the nail salon and it was so fun and like I had a great time and we were safe and everything. It's not totally confirmed that I got it from there because we did also go to the grocery store that day, but it is quite likely. So yeah, me and Jason had COVID. I just tested negative, so I can officially say I beat COVID. It was not the best. We are lucky to have had a mild case. Did not have a fever. I think the biggest thing was I was very congested. I still am slightly congested. But that's sort of the biggest thing remaining. I did lose my sense of taste and smell. Fortunately, it seems to have not fully come back, but like significantly came back. I mean, there was like a few days where I literally couldn't eat I ate, but like I had to force myself to eat because I just couldn't taste anything. I was also super, super fatigued. Like always love a good nap, love a good lie-in. But this was like, okay, I slept 11, 12 hours. Now I'm awake for 2 or 3 hours. I was barely cracking a book a day. So it was a rough time. And I mean, we wear our masks whenever we go outside. We haven't been to a restaurant, whether that's outdoor dining or indoor dining. We've been doing quite a lot of takeout, but we have seen some friends who we know have been safe and social distancing. Fortunately, we weren't really in contact with anybody around the time when we most likely got COVID, so we didn't, to our knowledge, infect anybody. So that's good. I mean, it's just a crazy time. I mean, my dad was at the beginning of November planning to come to LA from Boston. We canceled that even before we knew that we had COVID, just because with the rising cases and just he's, older and it's not safe. Normally I go back to Boston every year for Christmas time. We don't really celebrate it, but it's just kind of, I have some time off work and I like to go back to the East Coast to see my family once a year. That is not happening this year. So it's going to be over a year since I've seen my parents or my sister or like my one friend, Lindsay, on the East Coast. So it's weird. It's a weird time, but I beat COVID, and so we're again really lucky to have had very mild cases in the grand scheme of things. So just be careful, guys. Anybody can get it. That's the big update. A couple other updates. We got a ring light, so the quality of this is definitely going to improve. So no more using a lamp as the tripod. Now we have a full ring light, so that's great. And then if you haven't already, check out the interview / conversation with my former professor, Sarah Nielsen. That is going to be linked down below. That was just recorded a week ago. I mean, so I definitely was on the tail end of recovery. I had scheduled it before I knew I had COVID. Could have rescheduled it. Maybe should have, woke up like an hour before, but it was a really good excuse for me to like actually have something to do and like feel energetic and excited about. Maybe that's what spurred my recovery. I don't know. But we talked, Sarah's a Disney scholar. That's kind of her area of expertise and research. So we talked a lot about like Walt Disney's childhood. Jason and I have been watching a YouTube channel called Defunct Land, which talks all about defunct theme park attractions and such, primarily Disney, but definitely not entirely Disney. So we talked about some things that I had learned through watching the Defunct Land videos, particularly like Splash Mountain and sort of Song of the South and all that fun stuff. And then a couple of my good friends, Lizzie and Sean, who I actually met not in Sarah's class, but in a different film class sophomore year of college. They've become some of my best friends ever since. Sean lives in LA and we still see each other when we can, communicate all the time. Love you, Sean. So that was just really fun to connect with them via Zoom and have everybody all together. So a little University of Vermont reunion. Shout out to my alma mater. That will be linked down below. Definitely check that out if you have not already. And so we're going to get into the books. Maybe the energy is going to be weird today. Maybe you won't even have noticed. Maybe we'll do like some sort of clickbaity, like I had COVID and beat it, title. Maybe we won't, who knows? One more update before we get started. So typically, I was writing, so I keep, like, if you're a fan of the pod, if you're a friend, you know that I keep track of all my books on Goodreads. That's pretty much the only way I can keep track of everything, since fortunately I read everything primarily on my Kindle, so it connects directly. But in terms of planning the episodes, because I do usually read more than 5 books a week, or sometimes like take a week off in between recordings, so need to have some way to keep track of what I'm reading and want to talk about. So I was just kind of writing it in a notebook. And then the past few months, I have been really enjoying this book subscription service called Owl Crate, where every month they send you an exclusive young adult book, typically more fantasy stuff, which I'm into. I find that is kind of where young adult tends to have its strengths. I'm not so much interested in just like the young adult, like romance, slice of life stuff as much, unless it's really well written. But that's a whole nother episode and conversation. So Owl Crate, they send you like a book, and they send you some like 4 or 5 like reading and sort of literary themed goodies, but not like specifically like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings fandom like some other boxes do. And so one of the things that they sent was a reading planner, which I'm going to use a little bit differently. Like I said, like I keep track of what I want to read and rating my books and everything on Goodreads just because it's so much easier. But what's great about this is the weekly planner. I can then just kind of keep track of all the books that I want to talk about that week. Right now, I don't have like the energy or forethought to like then take notes and kind of think about what I want to write about in advance. I'm still going to pull up the Goodreads to get all that like fun info. But I think this could be really fun, and there's no like specific dates or anything, which is wonderful too. So you can kind of use it for years, or it doesn't have to be specifically like a 2020, 2021 planner. It is designed by Neil Gaiman. So, I don't know if it's something that I necessarily would have like bought for myself if I saw it, but it's something that came in my box, and I'm definitely going to use it, and it's useful. And, probably will be making an appearance in some more episodes. So anyways, we are going to get started after all that fun little updates. So the first book we're going to be talking about today, the Book of Atlantis Black, The Search for a Sister Gone Missing by Betsy Bonner. So this was a really cool book. It was sort of true crime, definitely very memoir. Betsy Bonner, the author, it starts with her sister Atlantis Black is found dead. And then we kind of go backwards from there, and it's the story of Atlantis's life. Atlantis is very eclectic. She's mentally ill, but the two are not mutually exclusive. She is a budding musician, sort of a nomadic, wandering traveler. And so Betsy and her mother have constantly had a difficult relationship with Atlantis. Atlantis is not an easy person, but towards the end of her life, there was quite a few mysteries. She was found dead in Tijuana of an overdose. So Betsy, part of the novel is kind of just, or novel, I'm sorry, part of the memoir book, whatchamacallit, I guess it's a memoir, nonfiction book. It's really just about her coming to terms with the grief and loss of her sister, and sort of also coming to terms with the mysterious circumstances. And, there's some speculation as to whether or not her sister is actually still alive, because there was a lot of, it doesn't become like down the rabbit hole conspiracy, but there are a lot of loopholes and red flags, or concerning things surrounding Atlantis's death. So it makes for an investigation, but it also, it's really the Book of Atlantis Black. So through her death, we're able to remember her life, and Betsy recounts her life as best as she can, and connecting with some mysterious people who were in her life. So it's well done. It's ultimately a story of family love and family bonds, and accepting people no matter what, and the lives and the legacies that we leave behind. I think Betsy has written some poetry before, so that definitely rings true. It's a prose novel, or it's not a poetic novel. It's not a novel of poems, but you can definitely, the words flow beautifully, and take something that could have been, more sensationalized, but also something that like is potentially a crime. Either way, it's a tragic death of a young woman, and something that needs sort of to be brought more to the forefront, as opposed to just like, another Ted Bundy documentary or whatever. So there is that one. Next, we have Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman. So this is considered practical magic 0.1. So Alice Hoffman is a wonderful, prolific author. She's written quite a few at least 10 novels, I think. So Practical Magic is one of her most famous, which was then turned into a movie. Then there was like a sequel to that, or there was one that I read a couple years ago about the family, like after what happens after Practical Magic, I think, or was it before? Is it like a prequel to Practical Magic? Either way, Magic Lessons, what we're focusing on, is sort of the prequel, the ultimate prequel, the ultimate prologue to the story of Practical Magic. Oh yeah, it was called The Rules of Magic. Okay, right. Okay, so the aunts in Practical Magic. Or whatever, doesn't matter. We're talking about a different one, Magic Lessons. So Magic Lessons through Practical Magic, these are descendants of Salem witches, witchcraft in a much more nuanced, not necessarily dark magic, just a sort of like taking energy from the earth, from something and putting energy back out into the universe. Magic Lessons is kind of a historical fiction novel. I mean, it takes place in the early 1600s. Our main character, her name is Maria. She is abandoned in the snow. She's taken in by an older woman in England. And so Maria is kind of the one that Maria Owens begins this curse that none of the Owens women can be loved. I won't give away the spoilers as to how or why that happens, but it's quite a sweeping epic. I mean, Maria goes on this journey from England to New England. She has her own child and raises her, and then she gets to sort of learn, the rules of magic, and the sort of, establishing what the modern witchcraft, at least in Alice Hoffman's other novels, sort of establishing the rules for that while being quite historically grounded and a much more complex understanding of magic and witchcraft, as opposed to just like the sort of crucible, like witchcraft equals bad, but like, really the roots and the society and where that came from, while still fully being the Owens women's stories. I mean, it uses all of that as a wonderful backdrop and a vessel to move the plot forward, but it's also really based in the women as fully developed characters and their journey. And so even if you haven't read Practical Magic or any of Alice Hoffman's other books, this book really just stands alone for anybody who's interested in going back to the past with a little bit of, historical magic and historical realism to an extent, because I'm not convinced that magic doesn't fully exist, but it's sort of, also like much more paganism, ritualistic sort of small miracles that we now understand scientifically also could have been considered magic back then. We don't need to go into that, but I don't know. It's good. Like, so maybe just on a scale of 1 to 5. Craziness. Okay. Our next book that we are talking about is Darling Rose Gold by Stephanie Wrobel. So this is a fiction novel, a psychological thriller, another sort of familial mother-daughter bond, very reminiscent and takes a lot from the Gypsy Rose story. It's about a young girl, Rose Gold, who has, her mother has been sort of poisoning her, Munchausen by proxy. Her mother's name is Patty. So it's a dual perspective novel. It's different in the sense that Rose Gold clearly has a lot more autonomy in this situation. From what I understand about the Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy Rose situation, that Dee Dee like really was controlling Gypsy Rose's life and fully brainwashing her. And in this novel, it takes a little more liberty because it's fiction, with the relationship and the dynamic between the mother and the daughter, like really who's manipulating who's controlling what. And so Patty is in prison for the abuse that she instills upon Rose Gold. And then she gets out of prison and comes back to live with Rose Gold. And so we kind of dovetail with Rose Gold's perspective. It's sort of leading up to Patty getting arrested and that situation. And then Patty's story is told from getting out of prison and then how she adjusts to life. And then for a little bit, I like in the beginning of the book, I like wasn't fully sure where it was going to go. It did just kind of feel very like, is this another just Munchausen by proxy, sort of like mother wronged the daughter forgiving, but giving the daughter, seeing her perspective. It's also, I mean, it's very different than the movie Run that came out. I mean, because Rose Gold is not necessarily the sort of victim, helpless character that these other girls are sometimes are or portrayed to be. So I don't want to give too much away, but there's definitely that psychological thriller component of it. I did sort of get a sense to figure out where the story was going, but it was still captivating and well written that I didn't feel the need, like, just because it was kind of knew where it was going, it was still enough of a juicy relationship, and it's not always the what happened, but the how and the why. So really getting to delve into these two women's psyches, which, I mean, it definitely passes the Bechdel test. So it's also, it's a thriller. There's Munchausen by proxy, there's infant abuse, so I don't want to say it's not light, but it's definitely, it's not the sort of slasher. It's really, again, it's more of an exploration between these two women and what drives people's behaviors, and how do we forgive and or not forgive. So that is that. The next book we have is The Beauty of Your Face by Sahar Mustafah. This was a really moving, beautiful book. I read it just before I was officially in the throes of the COVID sickness. I'm going to try my best to remember it, but that's why we have Goodreads. So Afaf is our main character. Again, this is it's not so much a multi-perspective, it's a multi-linear novel. Afaf moves, her family has just moved to Chicago. She, I think, was born in America, so they're from Palestine, I'm sorry. And so her older sister, Nada, who I have a friend named Nada, shout out to Nada, goes missing in the 70s. And so that we sort of then deal with Afaf and her, I hope I'm saying Afaf, and her younger brother growing up, and the parents have clearly, some trauma to go through. They're also adjusting to life in America while raising young children. And then that is dovetailed with Afaf is now a principal, the head of school for Muslim girls. And right from the beginning of the book and through the description, she actually is in the midst of a terrorist attack on the school. There is a shooter who comes in, and so it's really, that part is definitely, sensationalized and ripped from the headlines. But how did Afaf get there? How did the center get there? It's really just a really unique experience of what it's like to be I personally don't know, but I've read quite a few books, and, I've heard stories, and I have friends who were raised by parents who came from a totally different world and wanted to make the best for their children in this new world while still having a lot of customs and traditions that don't, jive with what is happening here. And how do you assimilate and try to fit in? How do you deal with loss when you have a child go missing? I mean, that's not the main focus of the novel, but it's something that permeates throughout Afaf's entire life. We also, the alt-right shooter, we get to know a little bit of his perspective, and I love how it's not all over the place, because every chapter is intentional with where it's at in time, but it's very intentional with its choices of when to go back in the future and the present. And it has a very cinematic sort of TV feel, but I don't know if it would really work for that, because it's such a look into Afaf's mind, both as a young girl and as an older woman, and as to get to know her family really well and their quirks and three-dimensional aspects. So she wrestled, as according to Goodreads, it's a profound and poignant exploration of one woman's life in a nation at odds with its ideals. And I think that says it really well. Goodreads, you that's probably just the summary from the back, but you did it again. And the last book we have is actually another physical book. This is not sponsored by Owl Crate, but would love if it could be. This is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is a special edition that I bought directly through Owl Crate, so I think the cover is like slightly different than the normal one. There's also gold edges or overlay spray, which I think is really nice. And there's also no jacket, which sometimes I think works and sometimes doesn't. I kind of like it without it, because while there can be quite beautiful illustrations, it just they get torn and it adds more. Sometimes you just need a simple book. So A Deadly Education is a young adult fantasy novel. It's kind of it has elements of Harry Potter, but what if Harry Potter was just better and written now? I don't want to fully compare it, but there is a school. It's called the Scholomance. It's about our main character, Elle, Galadriel. She is studying at the Scholomance school, which is kind of like a darker Hogwarts, you complete your education there, and then you can graduate and become a wizard. But that's if you live. The Scholomance exists in this like ethereal void, so it's like very abstract, but it also makes sense in the book. And a lot of people die throughout. It's a deadly education. It's hard to get your education. There's a lot of demons and, Death Eater type things. They're called like Malfeasors and monsters and other things. So that's a big part of it. But then again, also it's Naomi is just trying to graduate and make her way through, trying to survive. But she also has some special abilities and has spent most of her time at the Scholomance being a loner. But then she finds, a crew and some friends. And so they definitely help her. And, she's able to severely enhance her chances of survival in life. But where it differs from Harry Potter is that Naomi's the author. Elle is fully like the protagonist, and we really stay with her and get to know the other people fully through her eyes, and they're definitely like secondary characters in her story. Whereas like Harry Potter is like, yes, Harry is the vessel and the protagonist, but we don't stay with him all the time, and ultimately like he's not the best part of the series. And I think that Elle really is she's feisty, she's sassy. I'm excited to see where this goes. This is just book 1 of the Scholomance #1, so we'll see where else it goes. But I think if you're looking for a new, whether J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter comments have frustrated you, or you still are a diehard fan and you're always into that sort of like fantasy, new magic, cool thing that's just like better than Harry Potter, there's no cho-chang or anything like that, check out this one. And I do think that Owl Crate might still have this limited edition copy, which also comes with a vinyl pin. I'm starting to like amass a great vinyl pin collection from Owl Crate because you get one in your box every month. Again, not sponsored, but I'd love to be. And with that, I'm gonna continue my recovery from COVID, because while I have tested negative, I'm still not 100%. I mean, I'm worlds away than where I was a week or two ago, but it's a climb, as no doubt Miley Cyrus would say. So until next week, hopefully we'll get back into the swing of things, and we only missed 1 week, so it was fine. Nobody cared. Until next time, stay reading. Bye.